Welcome to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, the show where we talk about finding strength when life falls apart. I'm your host, Melie, and around here, resilience isn't perfection. It's falling flat, getting back up, and maybe laughing about it later. From breakups to breakthroughs, we mix faith, neuroscience, and a little sass to help you rebuild a life that actually feels like yours. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. Today we have a very special guest with us, Monica Bodurka, the founder of Leadership Wellness Group, where she helps people ignite the flame of resilience and create holistic well-being in mind, body, and spirit. Through her transformative programs, she empowers individuals to overcome adversity, regulate their nervous systems, and create psychological safety, not just in leadership, but in everyday life transitions. Monica, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, I'm so excited for our chat.
Me too. I want to start with something kind of big picture. On your website, you talk about igniting the flame of resilience, which I just love that because it ties in so great to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. But I wanted to ask you, when life falls apart, where does someone even begin finding that spark again?
Oh gosh, it's a great question, and I would say that hopefully people will have engaged in practices that before things fall apart, right? So the idea
Right.
is that resilience isn't necessarily about bouncing back, right? Research shows. We often say, oh, resilience is about bouncing back. How quickly can I come back to being my normal self? But when you actually dig into the research, it turns out that resilience is almost like a savings account. You add, right. You sort of add, you cultivate it through daily self-care, through daily practices, right? So that when adversity strikes, it's almost like you've got a charged battery. You have a reserve that you can draw on. Now, if you haven't done that, it's okay. If you haven't built that reserve, there are still things you can do. And a lot of it, again, comes back to self-care, and it comes back to regulating your nervous system.
Now, let's talk a little bit about what is actually happening inside our brain and our body. When I think, people hear the term regulate your nervous system and they're like, what does that exactly mean? Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Oh gosh, so I love to talk about the nervous system. I'm a trained yoga therapist, and often people don't even know what the nervous system is. So, or what neuroscience is, right? So the nervous system is comprised of our brain stem, our spine, and all these nerves around our body, right? And I like to point out that the spine is like a superhighway through which, you communicate everything that's going on in your body with your prefrontal cortex, actually, and your brain, right? The three different parts of your brain. So your nervous system, and I don't want to get technical about which part of the brain and what happens, but if you feel there's fire, right? If you feel you're in danger, something happens, there's a signal from your amygdala to say, oh my gosh, we're in danger. And the amygdala is like this superhero. So for example, if there's a football coming at you really quickly, before you can actually rationally think about it, you will quickly move out of the way. Right? So it's there to protect you. So basically, there's a signal in your brain that there's danger, and the blood can drain away from your brain into your hands and feet so you can run and get away from the danger. This is a situation where you perceive something bad is happening. So your nervous system, basically, you go into this red zone, right? And like I said, adrenaline goes up, cortisol goes up, your resiliency actually goes down, your prefrontal cortex shuts off. So your rational thinking brain is off because, again, all your energy is going into getting out of the danger. However, right, there's also the other part, which is when you're in the calm and your nervous system is, again, we would almost say in a blue zone, right, where you're regulated and everything is good and your prefrontal cortex is aligned with the rest of your brain. You're in the flow, you're flourishing. This is the state of resilience, right? Your brain is actually, the blood is flowing to the brain. And like I said, you're regulated, you're creative, you're happy, you're good, you've got good feeling hormones going through your body. So we almost see, like, that's one way to talk about it, kind of red zone, blue zone, right? It's your body, right? It's your body that is actually so essential in this. Like, we often think, I mean, the trigger could be emotion, obviously can be emotional and a thought, and often there's really no danger there. It's just a thought, right? There's no fire. But I don't know if I'm being, like, I can, it's so complex, right? So it's really hard to answer your question in one quick statement.
Makes sense, definitely. So when people go through something, a lot of people that listen to this podcast have been through things like divorce or some other major life upheaval. Why does that feel so destabilizing to the nervous system?
Well, again, because you go, something's happened, right? So you go into that red zone. You don't feel safe. The moment you don't feel safe, when you feel you're in danger, it's almost like one of the things we teach in our programs is that there's like a mood elevator. And through that, you kind of go from this, flourishing state of possibility and love and creation, and you can kind of go right down to, this survival state where, you're again operating in crisis mode, right? So, but the good news is there are things we can do to help us regulate and move up that mood elevator. So even though there's something terrible happening, we actually have a choice. We don't have to be a victim of that circumstance. We can become an owner, because we own our nervous system. We own our reactions, even in the worst of situations. And that's the resilience. I mean, not to belittle anything anybody's gone through at all, but there is that moment where you can at least lengthen your spine and take a breath. So this is
Right.
coming back to that spine I mentioned earlier.
Now, how would you define the term psychological safety for individuals specifically going through something like a personal hardship?
First of all, in our resilience programs, we really talk a lot about the need for connection, and often people will be, it's like a basic need.
Right.
One of our, that's what makes us human, and that's part of our limbic brain where we connect with others. Psychological safety in a relationship, when it's there, you can express ideas, you can express concerns, you can make mistakes, you can have questions, you can do all that. You can make mistakes, and without a fear, without the fear of punishment, without a fear of rejection, without a fear of, so psychological safety fosters trust and respect and communication. So it's critical. One of the things, aside from, let's say, relationships, let's say in a marriage, one of the studies I read was, for example, in children, the most important thing for a child to be resilient is actually psychological safety, is that feeling that they have a parent or a guardian or someone, an adult, that they're safe with, that they can be vulnerable and authentic with. And that's the base of a resilient child. And I think that's the key for us in relationships as well, that again, you're allowed to be vulnerable and authentic with one another. Yeah.
Right. And how do you create that for, let's say, for somebody who, maybe had that in a marriage or long-term partnership, and then it falls apart, and now, they are afraid to get out there and trust people again, even from, say, a platonic standpoint. They're a little bit
Mhm.
standoffish. They're
Mhm.
not ready to build that community. And like you said, community is so important, and having those connections with people in order to be truly resilient. So what would you say to that person who's like, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to trust anybody. I'm going to do this all on my own.
Right. Well, there's so many pieces to it. There's studies that show, this is at a Berkeley University, you put your hand on your heart, right? The heart has 40,000 neurons. Put your hand on your heart and you say, I am safe. I am safe. I am safe, right? I'm okay, right? One of the things is, often, and this is now from quantum physics, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? So often when we've had something traumatic or bad or happen, or you've been rejected, that's how you're going to perceive the world, because you want to protect yourself. You want to protect yourself. You don't want this to happen to you again. So before we start with others and things we can do, like setting boundaries and being an active listener, and we can talk about those. I think it starts with ourselves and telling your body it's okay, telling it will be okay, telling it you're safe, calming your nervous system, right? So you're not as afraid.
And I think for some people, they want to create that safety inside themselves and feel that, but they also have a sense of distrust for themselves because it's like, well, if I
Mhm.
made a bad decision, picked the wrong partner, for example, just stick with that. Like, how do I know that I can tell myself I'm safe? Maybe I'm the unsafe party in this situation, right? So how does somebody get out of that negative thought loop?
Right. So this is where we come back to, the work of, mindfulness gurus, right? Like
Mhm.
Thich Nhat Hanh, right? And again, I've still got my hands on my heart. I'm pulling up my spine. So I'm creating safety in my body right now. How am I doing that? So remember when I said the spine is a superhighway?
Mhm.
So when we lengthen our spine and tuck in our chin and roll back our shoulders and grow 3 inches, okay? Your diaphragm opens. Okay, so you can take a little deeper breath, and you can do this with me now. So I've just lengthened my spine, I've rolled back my shoulders, I've tucked my chin, and I've gotten a little bit taller. I'm sending a signal to my nervous system that I'm okay. So I'm not thinking about it, right? Thoughts often aren't real, right? We fear things that aren't true. We worry about things. I've heard worry. Somebody said, I think it was Steve Chandler, said worry is a misuse of our imagination, right? Because we worry about these worst case scenario, most of which never happen. Our mind is trying to protect us from things that might not be true, and it's making interpretations that might not be real. So, in a way, we have to put a pin in that. This is what we do in our coaching program. We say, let's put a pin in that problem for now, and let's get stronger. Let's get happier. Let's get healthier using the body the way I just shared with you, lengthening that spine, tucking that chin, rolling back those shoulders, and then just noticing your breath, deepening your breath. So inhaling for 4, and let's say I always do 4. I tell people 416 because I live in Toronto, Canada. So our Toronto area code is 416. So I'll say, let's inhale for 4, hold, and exhale for 6. But it could be inhale for 6 and exhale for 8, whatever is the number. The idea is when you exhale for a little longer than you inhale, you're sending a signal to your nervous system that you're calm, that all is fine, that you're okay. So right away, you are building psychological safety in your own body and you're teaching itself. So remember when we talked about that savings account, that resilience is that savings account. You're putting reserve in that savings account and you're teaching your body, you're creating new neural pathways. If you do this over and over several times a day, I call it the 60-second pause. So I lengthen that spine. I actually could say ABC. So I align that spine A, I notice my breath or extend my breath B, and C, I tell myself I am calm. I instruct my body that way and my body listens. This is again evidence-based. You can even C can also be chant or sigh. So, because then you're stimulating your vagus nerve. So, what we're doing here is before we start thinking about trusting someone else, we're creating trust and safety within our own body. Then that starts to become a habit. If we do it, that's why I say just do it 60 seconds, but do it over and over and over throughout the day. Maybe before a Zoom meeting, maybe as you're waiting for water to boil, just repeating this several times. And you start teaching your body and your nervous system that all is okay. And now you start showing up differently for people and they start showing up differently for you, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So you're saying if somebody finds that calm and that trust within themselves, other people will actually respond differently?
Yeah, so we're like animals, right? We sense things. You know how dogs can sense somebody, like
Mhm.
a dog can sense if you're scared of it.
Right.
So yes, there's actually something I'm trying to think of the PhD doctor. I think his name was Stephen Pork, and he is the inventor of the polyvagal theory. And he talks about something called neuroception. This is where we can sense each other. We can signal things to each other. So, for example, if you've had a really stressful day and you come home and you're anxious and you're stressed and you're tired, without saying a word, your partner or your kids will pick up on that. We have this ability. Again, it's our faces, our voices, our bodies. They project this in a way, and we don't even have to think about it consciously. It's on that subconscious level. And so when somebody's tense like that, it signals danger to another person, right?
Right.
It signals something's not right, and it's beyond logical, right? This is why, anxiety is contagious in a way, right? Or, you feel the energy and those signals, you pick up on those signals. So yes, this idea of neuroception, it mobilizes our defenses. So when we don't feel safe in our bodies, we don't connect as well with others. We don't engage as well with others. We don't provide the emotional warmth because we're in a state. We're in the other state. So now think about a relationship. Think about, let's say, a couple that both had a hard day at work and they come home, and this is what they're exhibiting, both of them or one of them. It's then very hard to convey safety to each other. So in that state, those two people might start getting defensive. They might not communicate well because they're signaling danger to each other. So now imagine knowing that and then making an intentional effort to almost wake up from that and say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this way. So what am I going to do about it? So I don't project this. Like, how do I soften? What helps me to soften? What helps me and my body to feel safe, even after a hard day at work and then fighting traffic and dealing with whatever? So again, like I shared with you earlier, one of the things is just becoming aware and becoming really mindful. There's all kinds of practices. You hold the handle to your door to come into your home. You intentionally say, I'm safe. You lengthen that spine, you roll back those shoulders, you remember something really good. You take a moment, for example, with that partner, and you think of that moment when you first started dating and it was really great. And you remember something really beautiful and a moment where you felt safe and protected and loved, or a moment of triumph in your life, right? You feel those feelings. It takes seconds. Now, guess what? Now your face, your voice, your body is going to communicate feelings of acceptance and maybe joy or whatever it is that you've summoned. It's just these small things, but like I said, we can't control another. And we can't, if you have kids, if anybody's got kids, they know this. You teenage girls, right? I can control myself, and I can control my energy, and I can control my vibration. I can control my response to people. This isn't to say that if somebody's in a toxic relationship, they shouldn't get out or it's their responsibility. Absolutely not. You have to be, it's part of your own self-respect and your own understanding, your own nervous system to say, hey, there's something not right here. So it's not that. But at the same time, coming back to your original question was, that person who's maybe been through a really traumatic relationship and, been hurt and distressed. And you asked me, where does that person start? And I would say they start with themselves and their nervous system and generating feelings and emotions of love and joy and safety, and then see what happens.
I love that. Now, I want to go back to one thing you were talking about when you said that people, pick up on feelings. And I think we've all experienced this. You walk in the door and you've had a bad day, and your partner or whoever is like, oh, I can feel the tension. So that we know happens. What do you think? Is it possible that, feelings of anxiety or trepidation or whatever somebody's going through can also show through in photos? Because the reason I'm asking this is I hear a lot from people who have been through, say, the toxic relationship. They got out, they've kind of got this sense that, they don't feel safe, but they decide, I'm going to get back on the apps or on the apps for the first time. I'm going to start trying to meet people. And yet there's this disconnect. They're not meeting people. People are not responding the way you would expect from,
Mhm.
their photos and their bio. And they're like, what's happening? Why doesn't anybody want to get to know me?
So I think you're so cool. That's such a great question. I think so. I would say, and I have no idea, so I'm making this up. Okay, but I would say it starts with yourself again. I think there's a lot of work being done on quantum physics, and I think it's fascinating. I do not ever like wish to convey that I understand it. But the idea is, remember when I said when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So if this person who may be beautiful and have gorgeous pictures and be smiling and radiant, when you look at the picture, they're gorgeous. But if the feeling that that person has, right, is I'm not ready, I'm really scared, I don't want this actually, subconsciously, I'm scared of this. I don't know if the photo picks it up, possibly, but it's more like this person is energetically pushing this away. That's why again, one could call me on BS here, but I really feel that often when someone opens up to the possibility of love and, things suddenly, they don't even have to go on an app. They'll bump into someone on the street. Do you know what I mean? Things, magic will happen, but it starts with you. It starts with that person. Are they ready? Is their nervous system calm? Is this what they really, really want? And then working on yourself to, in whatever way possible, to get rid of the fear. And remember, a lot of fear is false evidence appearing real. So even though it's happened in the past, doesn't mean it has to happen in the future. And remember, you're now a different person than you were before because you've learned so much through that situation. So you become someone different. And so you wouldn't necessarily choose the same people or choose the same situations. So again, it comes back to trust in yourself. So yeah, so I think it's about coming back to starting with your own energy, your own nervous system. And again, feeling okay and happy. I say follow your fun, follow your joy, follow your, do things you love, and that person's going to find you and they're going to be chasing you down because then you'll be emitting your authentic self.
So let's talk a little bit about resilience as a lifestyle. I know that, in your work, you talk a lot about building resilience, that it's not like this thing that you have or you don't. You can create resilience and it's a learned skill. What does that look like practically?
Okay. That's a great question. So, okay, what does it look like and how do you cultivate it? So, resilience. Okay, so one of the things that was really, really important for me to learn years ago when I started down this path was the American Psychological Association states very clearly that resilient individuals have habits, behaviors, thoughts, right? We just talked a lot about thoughts, and actions that make you resilient, right? So it's not this innate quality that some lucky few have and others don't, right? Resilient can be cultivated and built. Again, remember, think of it as that reserve. We talked about a bank account. Another way to think about it is like shock absorbers in a car or on a bicycle. So the bumps in the road will be there. We don't control those bumps. Remember, we don't control the bumps. However, when you have those shock absorbers, those bumps are a little less bumpy, but the road is a little smoother. That's what resilience in action looks like. So the question now is, how do we cultivate those shock absorbers? How do we, fill that bank account so that we are able to handle life's ups and downs with more grace and ease? So it turns out, and in my programs and in my book, we've got sort of 3 pillars. And the first one is all about the physical body, which is what we were talking about. And people are always shocked about it because they think, oh, it's mindset. It's mindset. Yes, there is a really big component of mindset and kind of self-awareness. But we actually start with the physical body. The reason for that, and like I said, I was shocked by that. I train coaches and they're always shocked by it too. And so imagine just a time where you had the flu. So when you have the flu and you have a fever and now something stressful happens, you don't have the energy, the strength to make good decisions. Like there's nothing in you. The things we can do to cultivate resilience right away, the simplest one is actually to focus on sleep, which is really hard if somebody's going through something really difficult, but it's learning how to shut down the mind and calm the nervous system. So it comes back to the autonomic nervous system. We've got the parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sympathetic is the stress response. Parasympathetic is the rest, digest, and detox. We want to kind of be in that parasympathetic so our body can fully rest and recover. Sleep is like a superpower for us. It's unbelievable. It really restores us. And we're talking about deep sleep. So that's one of the ways people cultivate their resilience right away. And there's all these studies that show that you can actually be more present. Your prefrontal cortex is more engaged, that thinking rational part of you. Your response to stressors is much better when you're fully, and you, I mean, we all know this, right? So it's a really good thing to start with, is to sort of do a little sleep audit and say, how am I sleeping? And what can I do to improve it? Because that's your fastest way actually to enhance your resilience, which is so simple.
Wow. And I can actually say from personal experience that is definitely the case. After going through my divorce, became completely, I had insomnia. I was sleeping really poorly. And like you said, you can't really make good decisions or be
Yeah.
present with people when you're sleep deprived or
Like,
working with like half a tank. So I actually got, and I'm not sponsored by them, anybody listening, so I get nothing if you go and get one, but I got an Aura ring, which tracks your
mm,
sleep. And it has done wonders for me, helping me not only just know, like, what's a good time for me to go to bed? What's like the ideal time for me to wake up? And just helping me kind of, it gives me little notifications on my phone, like, hey, you might want to get ready for bed now. You're getting
mm,
close. And I love it. So that's one way you could, start to improve your sleep, is tracking it and knowing your body. Do you have any other suggestions for people who are like, I'm up all night, I can't sleep? What
yeah.
can they do?
So again, I mean, I'm like a broken record here. The nervous system, right? So, you know, we need to calm our nervous system. So if you're watching TV or something scary at night, or you're on your computer or you're on your phone, blue light, first of all, decreases your melatonin, which is the hormone we need to sleep. So what you want to do is you want to ensure your melatonin levels are high. You want to get natural light in your eyes at the beginning of the day because that helps boost your melatonin. But you also want to ensure that at least an hour before bed, you're not on electronic devices, which is really hard for us in our day and age, right?
Yeah, that is.
But it's huge. And then this idea of like having a wind down routine. I remember when my girls were little, we had like elaborate routines to before they went to bed. We would bath them, have like a little baby massage. You give the baby a bottle, or you nurse them, you read them a story, you sing this a song, the lights are dimmed. Like it's, you talk to most parents and they do something like this, and they also know if they go out with the child, with their baby, and they don't do that, then either the baby won't go to sleep or they wake up in the middle of the night. You're like, oh my God. So we are the same. We're big babies. We almost need to signal to our nervous system. The idea of dimming the lights is really good. So dimming the lights, shutting off the blue light, having, I don't know, like soft music, whatever works for you. Having a bath, an Epsom salt bath is huge because yeah, it relaxes your muscles. And then after, getting a little bit cool after the bath sends a signal again to your system to calm down, having a dark room, like all the best practices around sleep. The other things I like to do is again, that breath that I was sharing with you before, right? Where you breathe out for a little longer than you breathe in. So doing some breathing exercises. I actually put my feet up on a wall. Like I said, I studied yoga. So this kind of inversion again. So I put my feet up on a wall and then I do my breathing, and it's amazing. Like it really helps me to go deep and fall asleep quickly.
That does work. I will say I had a relationship dating coach as I was kind of getting myself back out there after my divorce, and I was totally spiraling over something, and she had me lay on the floor, put my legs
Mhm.
up the wall, put my
Yeah,
hands like on my belly and breathe,
yeah,
and man,
yeah.
that worked.
It does. It literally does. Like it's so funny. So I'm like, I always say people just be your own experiment and do it yourself. Don't, just try it. It can't hurt. It's so funny. My husband always thinks I'm so wacky. And he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And now he does it because I'm like, this is great, right? If you've
Yeah.
got varicose veins, especially, like I know like some people struggle, that also helps. And just after a long day when you've been on your feet and you're running around, it really, really, really works. So it costs nothing. Just try it, right? So you
Yeah.
just scooch yourself. I just do it on my bed. I lay my feet up on the bed frame, scooch myself up, and you could even read your book that way. I do breathing exercises. That's what I like to do. Helps calm me. Somebody you could put on a meditation as well. But again, what you're doing is you're systematically signaling to the nervous system you're okay. Right? I am safe. That's what your system needs. You had insomnia after a traumatic event and your body did not feel safe. So it was not safe to sleep. I struggled with insomnia after I had a concussion. My nervous system was shot. It did not feel safe to sleep. So I did all this work on my nervous system to help it feel safe again. So that's again, it's that psychological safety. It's the safety within ourselves.
Right. Yeah, and it's so interesting because, yeah, you don't think of resilience and sleep. Like, I think a lot of people, and I hear this a lot when they're like, isn't it just about pushing through? What would you say to that person who's like, you know what, I don't need all this. I'm just going to power through?
So yes, I meet those people and they burn out.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happens. And they can, and for a long time they can. And then sometimes, often it's although it's happening younger and younger, I was going to say often it's, in midlife, people be like, oh my God, and they get overwhelmed and they burn out. We are not meant to go, go, go. We're human beings, not human doings, as everybody likes to share. So yeah, if you and that was a myth, right? Say, and I actually had a gentleman at a workshop get up and I said, what does resilience mean to you? And he actually got up and he quoted the Rocky Balboa quote from the movie, and it was something about like, it ain't about how hard life hits, it's how hard you can take it and keep standing, or something like that. I don't know that quote off the top of my head, but he looked so worn. He looked like he was on the verge of burnout. And I was like, no, that's not it at all. And in fact, what happens if you keep going, you actually become less productive. You become less efficient, right? So the idea is when you rest, when you recharge, when you take regular breaks, we have something called an ultradian rhythm. So when we take regular breaks, our productivity, our efficiency goes up, our psychological safety goes up, our happiness goes up, right? So you actually are able to do more and achieve more that way. So that's what the research showed. I can't take credit for it, right? So yes, pushing through, yeah, for a while it may work for many people. The adrenaline, the cortisol will keep you going, but then often something happens, right? And it's not sustainable.
Definitely not sustainable. When people do mention that, like, oh, you just gotta like power through, a lot of that I think comes from a place of fear of like, if I stop
Mhm.
to think about what's happening, then I'm gonna fall apart. So I'm just gonna go 100 miles an hour and just not stop, which, like you said, will lead somebody down a path of burnout eventually. And it is interesting you mentioned it's happening younger and younger. Usually that would be like your typical what midlife crisis, right? But you do see young people
Mhm.
trying to do so much
Yep.
and trying to be so much and show up in all these places. What do you think as far as like building resilience for, young people, let's say like, teenage to like early young adult, before they've necessarily gone through,
Mhm.
obviously some people have gone through stuff at that age, but before they've gone through the big trials of life, what advice would you give to that age group?
Gosh, so it's interesting. I have two teenage daughters. They're turning 16 and 14 this summer. And I see the huge pressure. They got their report cards today. The huge pressure to really do well in school, huge pressure to also be athletic and this and that and look a certain way and also have a job and do, it's a huge amount. I think with teenagers, so this is now the second pillar, and there's more in the first one we talked about the physical, but is a lot to do with self-awareness and self-acceptance and self-love, right? There's that, and a lot of it starts with mindfulness, right? It's when you were talking about that person who's going and scared to slow down
Mhm.
because they're scared to maybe be with themselves even and be with their thoughts. Slowing down, it's moments. It's the moment to tune in to yourself, to tune in to your own intuition. We all have it, right? So when you think about choices that young people make, right? Do I want to do this or not? I'm thinking of the huge peer pressure, right? There
Right.
is. So again, it's about learning to know themselves, and then also, like I will tell you, it comes back to the nervous system. So right before exams, and my daughter had 3 exams in a row. She had a science exam, followed by an English exam, followed by a math exam. Like
Wow.
literally each day, I was like, oh my gosh. And it was really interesting because a lot of her friends had that same schedule, and a series of them were here studying, and they know what I do, and they were like, oh my God, we're so nervous. And one of the things they said, and I digress a little bit, but I'll bring it back. But one of the things they said is, oh my gosh, we have studied so much, and then we go into the exam and we forget everything. And how come? Why is that happening? And it was really interesting because I explained to them what I teach often is the hand model of the brain and how the prefrontal cortex can disengage. Because when remember we talked about when that amygdala fires, that superhero that tries to protect us and puts us into fight or flight, that prefrontal cortex, that rational thinking brain will disengage. So I was telling them that what's happening is their prefrontal cortex is disengaging, right? And so that rational thinking brain that they need to write that exam, to know all that stuff they studied, has disengaged. So I taught them how to bring it online, which is how we did earlier. I taught them to lengthen their spine and roll back their shoulders and take a deep breath and have that diaphragm open and take a deep breath and lengthen that breath. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, oh, I feel so relaxed. I was teaching them to breathe out through pursed lips because that helps lengthen your exhale. So you inhale again for, let's say, 4, and then you exhale. And it's almost like you're exhaling through a straw. That's now calming their nervous system. In that moment also, they're pausing. So they're able to almost tune in with themselves, right? And that is huge, right? So you're not just running and going. So I think for young people, to answer your question, learning things like this, learning things about how to calm, right? And how to tune into themselves and how to take a pause and how to trust themselves. Like I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And it's in the context of young people, but even, no matter what age you are, you can learn this stuff, right? You're not stuck. If you didn't learn resilience and say someone's in their 40s or maybe 50s, they still can learn this, right?
Well, the beautiful thing is that you could be over 100 and be learning this. There's the whole field of neuroplasticity that shares we can create new neural pathways at any age. So until recently, they used to think the brain only is sort of growing or developing until the age of 18. And then they said you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, the whole field of neuroscience and now neuroplasticity has shown that is not the case. So you can be in your hundreds and creating new neural pathways and creating these new habits, new behaviors, new thoughts. You can control your thoughts and taking new actions that makes you, and when I say resilient, I'm saying happier, healthier, stronger. That's what resilience in action looks like.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Monica. This has been such a great conversation, and I truly believe that listeners are going to get a lot out of this.
It's my pleasure. It's so great. And it's such an important topic. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. And I hope today's conversation with Monica reminded you that resilience is not something you either have or don't. It's something you can build little by little, especially when you're going through one of those dumpster fires. So whether you're navigating grief, a transition, or you're just trying to feel safe in your own skin again, remember you are not alone and you are not broken. If something Monica said resonated with you today, please be sure to check out the links in the show notes to learn more about her work. We'll have links to her book. And if this episode encouraged you, please share it with a friend who might need it too. Healing does not happen in isolation. So until next time, friends, be kind to your nervous system, give yourselves grace, and remember you are stronger than you feel right now. Be well. Thanks for listening to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. If today reminded you that resilience is a practice, not a personality trait, you're in the right place. Keep showing up, keep rebuilding, and don't forget, even diamonds start as pressure and mess. For more faith-filled encouragement and real-life tools to help you heal and grow, check out the show notes for some free resources and ways to stay connected. See you next time.